So picture this. You've finally decided you're going to start investing. Maybe you've had that decision sitting in the back of your head for a while now. Months, maybe longer. You open up a brokerage account, you log in, and then you're just kind of staring at the screen. Because there are thousands of funds. Thousands. There are large cap funds and small cap funds and mid cap funds and sector funds and ESG funds and international funds and emerging market funds and dividend funds and growth funds, and honestly, by the time you've read through 10 of them, you've already forgotten what the first one was. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a quiet, creeping thought starts to form. Maybe I should just wait until I understand this better. And so you close the tab. Again. My name is Josh, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, investing psychology, and why genuinely smart people who make good decisions in literally every other area of their lives, will walk up to the edge of investing and then quietly back away, convinced that the complexity is the point, that somewhere out there is a secret portfolio that only the financially sophisticated get access to. I've talked to people with advanced degrees who are still keeping their savings in a 0.01% interest checking account because the investment world felt too intimidating to step into. And what I find so fascinating, and honestly a little bit maddening, is that the actual answer to building long-term wealth is almost offensively simple. And that simplicity is exactly what makes people distrust it. Today, I want to walk you through something called the three-fund portfolio. It's one of the most quietly powerful investing strategies that exists, and it has exactly three moving parts. Three. And by the time we're done here, you're going to understand not just what those parts are, but why they work. What makes this strategy so durable across different market conditions, and why the people who tend to use it almost always outperform the people frantically shuffling between hot stock tips. Not because they're smarter, because they stopped trying to be. Here's something that took me an embarrassingly long time to fully internalize. The investment industry, the funds, the advisors, the financial media, the trading apps with their little confetti animations, they all have a structural incentive to make investing feel complicated. Because complexity justifies fees. Complexity justifies subscriptions. Complexity justifies the advisor who takes 1% of your portfolio every year to manage it for you. The dirty, unglamorous truth is that the average actively managed mutual fund, the kind run by a team of analysts with Bloomberg terminals and MBA degrees and years of market experience, underperforms a basic index fund over any 15-year period. Not sometimes, reliably, consistently. Study after study, year after year, the data keeps arriving at the same conclusion. And yet the actively managed fund industry manages trillions of dollars because it feels like you're getting something more sophisticated, something smarter, something that's actually doing work on your behalf. There's a great analogy here. Imagine you're a gardener, and you have 2 plots of land. On one plot, you have a master horticulturalist who spends every day pruning, replanting, rotating crops, and experimenting with different soil compositions. He charges you a significant fee for his expertise. On the other plot, you just plant good seeds, water them occasionally, and leave them alone. Over 10 years, the second plot produces more food. Not because neglect is a strategy, but because the constant interference, the fees, the switching costs, and the behavioral mistakes that come from trying too hard all compound against you over time. This is essentially what the three-fund portfolio is built around. The philosophy underneath it is John Bogle's, the founder of Vanguard, the guy who invented the index fund. And it's almost zen in its simplicity. Own the market, keep costs low, and don't touch it. Okay, so let's actually get into the structure because I want to be really clear here. This isn't a vague philosophical framework. This is a literal portfolio you can implement in a single afternoon. Fund 1, a total U.S. stock market index fund. This is the core. something like VTI or FSKAX or SWTSX, depending on your brokerage. What you're buying when you buy one of these funds is essentially a tiny slice of every publicly traded company in the United States. We're talking over 3,000 companies. Apple and Microsoft and the little regional bank in Ohio and the mid-sized manufacturing company in Tennessee and the biotech startup that might be a huge deal in 5 years. All of it. You're not betting on any one company. You're betting on the American economy as a whole. And here's the thing about that bet. Historically, it's been a really good one. Over any 20-year period in modern U.S. history, the stock market has gone up. There have been crashes, panics, recessions, wars, financial crises, and across all of it, the long-term trajectory has been upward, not because of magic. Because companies generate real profits, those profits create real economic value, and over time, that value is reflected in prices. You're just capturing that growth systematically. The expense ratio on something like VTI is 0.03%. 3 basis points. That is, and I want you to really feel this, 3 cents for every $100 invested per year. Compare that to the average actively managed fund expense ratio of around 0.7 to 1%, and the math starts to get kind of wild when you project it out over 30 years. Fund 2. An international stock market index fund. This one gets skipped more than it probably should. The most common version you'll see is something like VXUS or FZILX, a total international stock market fund that covers developed and emerging markets outside the United States. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Why do I need international stocks? The U.S. market is the best in the world, right? And look, that instinct isn't crazy. The U.S. has genuinely outperformed international markets for the last decade plus. But here's the thing about recency bias. The decade that feels most vivid to you is not a reliable guide to the next decade. There have been extended periods, the 2000s for instance, where international stocks significantly outperformed U.S. stocks. You don't know which environment you're going to be investing in, so you hold both. This is called diversification, and it's one of the few genuinely free lunches in investing. By spreading across geographies, you reduce the risk that a slowdown specific to one country or region tanks your whole portfolio. You're smoothing the ride, and a smoother ride means you're less likely to do the one thing that almost always destroys long-term returns: panic and sell at the bottom. A typical allocation might be somewhere around 60 to 80% U.S. and 20 to 40% international, though this varies by personal preference and risk tolerance. Fund 3. A bond index fund. Bonds are the one part of this portfolio that people find the most confusing, and honestly, I get it. They're less intuitive than stocks. But let me try to give you the simplest version. When you buy a bond fund, something like BND or FXNAX, you're essentially lending money to the U.S. government and large corporations and receiving interest in return. Bonds don't grow as fast as stocks over the long run, but they don't crash as dramatically either. When stocks fall 30%, a bond fund might fall 5% or even go up slightly, because investors tend to move toward bonds as a safe haven during market turbulence. The purpose of bonds in the 3-fund portfolio is stability. They're the shock absorber, and the percentage you hold in bonds is generally tied to your time horizon. If you're 28 and investing for retirement, you might hold 10 to 15% in bonds. If you're 55 and retiring in 10 years, you might hold 30 to 40%. A rough rule of thumb that some people use is to hold your age in bonds as a percentage. So if you're 35, you hold 35% bonds, though plenty of investors today think that's too conservative given longer lifespans and lower bond yields. The point is, you're not trying to get rich from your bond fund. You're trying to not get destroyed by a market downturn in a way that makes you abandon the strategy entirely. I want to spend a moment here because I think this is the part that doesn't get enough attention. The reason the three-fund portfolio works isn't just the diversification or the low costs, though both of those matter enormously. It's that the simplicity of the strategy makes it psychologically easier to hold. Think about that for a second. One of the most documented findings in behavioral economics is that individual investors consistently underperform the very funds they're invested in. How is that possible? Because they buy in when things are going up and sell when things are going down. They check their portfolios during a market crash, feel the visceral panic of watching their balance drop, and make an emotional decision that costs them compounding years they'll never get back. The three-fund portfolio is boring by design. There's almost nothing to do. You set your allocation, you automate contributions, and then you do other things with your life. You don't need to research individual stocks. You don't need to follow earnings reports or Fed announcements or whatever macro trend someone on financial Twitter is worried about this week. You own everything, so nothing bad can happen to any one company that derails you. And here's where the compounding math starts to do something almost unreasonable. If you invest $500 a month starting at age 25 into a portfolio that returns 8% annually, which is conservative relative to historical averages, you'll have around $1.7 million by age 65. Wait until 35 to start, with the same contributions and same return, you end up with about $745,000. The difference between a 25-year-old and a 35-year-old starting isn't $60,000 in contributions. It's nearly $1 million. That's the compounding effect, and the three-fund portfolio is essentially a machine designed to capture it without interference. Let me make this concrete, because I think one of the reasons people stay stuck is the gap between I understand the concept and I know exactly what to do next. Step 1 is choosing a brokerage. Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab are the three most common platforms for this strategy, and all three offer their own versions of these index funds with expense ratios near zero. Fidelity even has zero expense ratio index funds, FZROX and FZILX, which is pretty hard to argue with. Step 2 is deciding on an account type. For most people, the priority order is, if your employer offers a 401k match, contribute enough to get the full match first. That's an instant 50 to 100% return on that money, which nothing else will beat. After that, maxing a Roth IRA is typically the next best move if you qualify, because that tax-free growth over decades is enormously valuable. Then back to your 401k or a taxable brokerage account. Step 3, and this is where you actually choose your three funds, is just picking the versions offered on your platform and deciding on a rough allocation. Here's a simple starting point that works for most people in their 30s. 60% total U.S. stock market, 30% total international, 10% bonds. Adjust the bond percentage up as you get older. Step 4 is automating. Set up automatic contributions on a schedule, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever works for your cash flow. This accomplishes something called dollar cost averaging, which is a fancy term for the simple idea that when you invest the same amount regularly regardless of market conditions, you naturally buy more shares when prices are low and fewer when prices are high. You're systematically removing the temptation to time the market. Step 5, and this one is counterintuitive but critically important, is to stop checking it so much. Seriously. Once a year, rebalance your portfolio to bring it back to your target allocation. That's it. That's the entire ongoing maintenance requirement of this strategy. I want to address a few things I hear pretty frequently when I talk about this because I think they're worth engaging with, honestly. But I know someone who got rich picking individual stocks. You probably do. You might even know a few people. But you're subject to survivorship bias. You don't hear from the much larger group of people who tried the same thing and quietly lost money. Stock picking as a consistent, repeatable strategy for generating market-beating returns is something that essentially doesn't exist at the individual investor level over long time periods. The evidence for this is overwhelming, and it doesn't particularly care about your exceptions. Isn't this too simple? Shouldn't I be doing something more sophisticated as I build wealth? This is actually my favorite one, because the implication is that complexity is a signal of rigor and simplicity is a sign of naivety. But look at the actual track record. Warren Buffett, probably the most celebrated investor alive, has repeatedly said that for most people, a simple S&P 500 index fund is the right answer. He has a standing bet famously that an index fund would outperform a basket of hedge funds over a decade. He won that bet comfortably. The three-fund portfolio isn't simple because it's a beginner strategy. It's simple because complexity in investing is almost always a liability. What about real estate? Crypto? Individual stocks on the side? These aren't necessarily incompatible with a three-fund portfolio as your core. A lot of people use this as their primary wealth-building engine and allocate a smaller percentage, some people say 5 to 10%, to higher risk, higher variance things they find interesting. That's reasonable. What tends not to work is using speculative investments as your entire strategy while telling yourself you'll get to the boring stuff later. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The three-fund portfolio is not a hack. It's not a trick. It's not a secret that some people know and others don't. It is a disciplined, evidence-based approach to capturing the long-run growth of the global economy at the lowest possible cost and with the least possible behavioral interference. And it has worked. Across bear markets and bull markets, across recessions and booms, across decades. The thing that makes this hard isn't the investing part. The investing part is almost embarrassingly simple. What's hard is resisting the feeling that something this simple can't possibly be the answer. What's hard is logging into your portfolio in March 2020, when the market drops 35% in 6 weeks, and not doing anything. What's hard is ignoring the colleague who made a quick 20% on some options trade and not letting that rewrite your strategy. What's hard is the patience. But here's the quiet truth I keep coming back to. Almost every person I've seen actually build significant long-term wealth didn't do it by being the smartest person in the room. They did it by picking a sensible strategy and then just not stopping. Month after month, year after year. The compounding did what compounding does. You don't need to outperform the market, you just need to own it. So if you've been sitting on the edge of this, if you have money in a savings account getting eaten alive by inflation, or if you've been meaning to open that brokerage account for 6 months now, maybe this is the nudge. Not because you have everything figured out and not because the timing is perfect. Just because simple, boring, consistent investing started today will always beat perfect investing that never actually happens. The best portfolio is usually the one you actually stick with. Now, if you found this video valuable, make sure to press that like button, comment your portfolio strategy, and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.